I just want to mention that how lucky we are here in Buffalo, in Western New York, and even in Southwestern Ontario, that the guy who transfers the Buffalo Sabres to all of us on the radio and television is Rick Jeanneret. Nobody does it any better than he. And I will say this, I knew Rick before I became his partner. And I always thought, geez, would it ever be nice to do a game with Rick Jeanneret? Well, I've had the good fortune of, for the last 4 years or so, doing a lot of games with Rick, and it's been my honor. And it's also been my privilege to call him one of my best friends. Up to you.
I mentioned when we had the press conference to announce this event that I had no intention of broadcasting hockey when I got into the radio business. Since then, I've had several people ask if I was serious when I said that. And yes, I was. When I arrived in Niagara Falls to work at what was then CHVC, it was my fourth station in 9 months. The last was in Kenora. You can Google that later. I wanted to be a jock. I wanted to be the next Stan Roberts or Freddie Klestine or Danny Nevereth or Joey Reynolds even. What are you laughing at? I don't look like a rock and roll animal? Is that what you're saying? Well, anyway, somebody got sick one day, and I stumbled onto this gig and got to admit it turned out not so bad. Mine has been a journey filled with some of the most remarkable moments this city has ever seen, and with people I will not soon forget. Those moments and people are too numerous to mention or name, or to choose favorites for that matter. Each and every one has brought me to this podium today, and for that, I am forever grateful. What does need mentioning is something that became very clear to me early on, even from my first Sabres game in the Odd, and that is the infatuation this city has for its hockey team. From those early days when the French Connection was dazzling crowds, and me, to the playoff runs of more recent years in First Niagara Centre, this city's love affair with their team has swelled to a crescendo that grows with each passing season. To bear witness and put words to the moments and memories that have meant so much to Sabre fans is truly humbling. I was merely the voice, providing a narrative to a great story of a greater franchise with the greatest fans in hockey.
Welcome back to Buffalo Sports Insider, bringing you everything sports, everything Buffalo. This is KJ Zielezinski, joined with Hunter Lobur Cummins, Deshawn Francois, and Colton Pankewicz. Before we go any further, we'd really like to open today by remembering the Hall of Fame broadcaster and Buffalo Sabres legend, Rick Jeanneret, who passed away last Thursday. We'd also like to give our condolences to Sandra and the rest of the Jeanneret family. RJ was an inspiration to so many of us here at the studio. So we'd also like to welcome our guest here, Marty Biron, just revered legend in the Sabres community, team, whatever you want to call it. Thanks for being here, Marty. And I'd really just like to open and I mean, anything about RJ that you can say within your career. Do you just have a favorite memory of yours while you were playing, that like a call that you had that just really stood out to you?
Well, first of all, great intro. That was a fantastic speech that I remember RJ giving at the Buffalo Sports Hall of Fame. You know, he had such a way with words. That was the one thing. Like, it wasn't just a play-by-play, but it was a way with words, a way with emotions and passion and tone and excitement and disappointment all together in his voice. And that made him the great person and, you know, announcer that he was. Now, if there's one save, maybe I remember, there's two moments in my career I remember and will always forever be linked with RJ, I think, is the save on Andy Delmore when I went out of my crease and I came back and diving across like Superman. I got a stick on the puck and RJ made it sound like this was all on purpose. Hey, Biron way out in the net. Oh, he comes back to Rob Delmore blind, and it's like, oh, this was on purpose. Like I knew what I was doing. I had no idea what I was doing, and he definitely made it sound really, really good. And Ray Emery fight actually was one that I remember because the Delmore save, nobody's going to say, let's listen to what it sounded like on the Flyers broadcast, because RJ was incredible. But the Re-Emery fight, when you watch the fight and you say, Omar, I took a lot of punches. I went down really quickly. And RJ, at such a way to not make us, the Sabres player, feel or look bad, that he's just so excited for a goalie fight. And he never once said that I was getting beaten up. So it looks like I did pretty good in the fight, but then you listen to the Ottawa broadcast and I'm getting destroyed. So I want to thank him for always having our back, obviously, but those are probably the two memories of me playing that stand out for sure.
Thanks for joining us today, Marty. It's Hunter Lobur Cummins here. Really appreciate your time. I was going to ask, what's your favorite call from a fan perspective, one that you actually weren't on the ice for, if you can narrow it down, as there are quite a few choices?
I remember two very vividly that I actually had as a ringtone on my cell phone. Like, we're looking at 2004, 2005, ringtones became really popular. So I had the Mayday call, right? So everybody knows the Mayday call. But funny enough, that was a radio call. It wasn't a TV call. So you got to put the radio call on with the images of the TV game to be able to get both together. So that, to me, the Mayday, call was a ringtone of mine. And then at Christmas, I would change it to the la 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 Fontaine. And it was, so that's the one. I mean, the LaFontaine goals, when RJ would just go la 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 la, it would just nonstop, right? I was just a teenager living in Quebec City, and I would get up in the morning and watch the highlight shows, and I was hoping that LaFontaine had scored a goal so I could hear them play the RJ calls. So I would say those are the two probably most iconic calls, but I had them both as my cell phone ringtone, and I was proud of playing for the Sabres. It was geek, like I was a dork, right? I was playing on the Sabres, and I had Sabres ringtones on my cell phone. Like, who does that? But I loved it.
Those are definitely some spectacular calls. I was not alive for either of them, but like many of us, and I'm sure you too, I love just going back on YouTube and putting myself almost in the arena for what they would have been like. So thank you very much again.
Hey, Marty, this is crazy. Can you explain what it's been like to go from having someone so prestigious like RJ calling your games, and then I think you came back in 2017, was it, to the Sabres broadcast, and actually working alongside him and sharing those one-on-ones a bit more?
Well, I say my relationship with RJ was in three folds, like three chapters. The one was that as a teenager, I would wake up to hear the highlights and see if LaFontaine or somebody had scored and what RJ had called. And then he was calling my games, and it was him and Jim Lawrence, and they were so good together. I know Harry Neal worked with RJ for a few years, and Harry was a legend on Hockey Night in Canada and then during the Sabres game. But when I played, it was Rick Jeanneret, Jim Lawrence. They were so good together. Their chemistry was awesome. Their education of the fans and the game was awesome. So that was chapter 2. And then chapter 3 started before 2017, because I did fill in a few times here and there on the Sabres broadcast. And what I have missed really the last 3 years since the pandemic is we used to have a room set up for media dinners at the arena. So I'd get there around 4:30 for a 7:00 game, and I'd go to the media room, and there would be a full buffet, and we'd sit down and have dinner. I remember the first time I showed up to that room, there was a table with a sign that says reserved for Rick Jeanneret. So I grabbed my food and I sat at a table like a couple of tables over. I'm like, I'm not sitting at Rick Jeanneret's table. That's reserved for him. And then RJ came and sat down, looked at me, goes, Marty, you working with us tonight? I'm like, yeah. He goes, come on over here. And so I got to sit with him. And, every time I worked the games, and then when I became full-time, studio analyst with the Sabres in 2017, then 40 times a year, every home games, I'd show up, either grab dinner at 4:30, and RJ was there, and we'd sit at the table, or if it was an afternoon game, it was like a breakfast kind of brunch type of scenario. But every game, I'd sit down, have dinner with him until the pandemic, and then the rooms have been changed a little bit, so we don't have that anymore. But it was a treat, like to be able to have dinner with Rick Jeanneret, a couple times a week, talk about hockey, talk about life. He talked about his family. That's when I got to know him a little bit better. He talked about Sandra, his wife, but we know her as Cupcake. And he'd be like, "Oh, Cupcake did this," and and the grandkids were the grandbrats. He would talk about. He was so proud of his family. So that's what I got to know of him, and that's when I got to really know him well.
All right, Marty. So since I see you talking about a lot of getting into those conversations with Rick, what would you say is the greatest piece of advice that Rick has ever gave you in your life?
Well, RJ was very sarcastic and always found a way to take a dig, and he was so funny. He would always joke around with my accent and say, "Hey, you know what? Slow down. I can't understand what the heck you're saying." But I speak fast, and it's not just RJ. I remember doing some MSG work in New York with Al Trotwig, and Al Trotwig was like, "Hey, just slow down." And I tried to slow down, but it just is not me. It's not my personality. So RJ was like, "Well, okay, if you're going to speak fast, then make sure you sound like English, not Franglish." And he used to always joke around with my Franglish. But one of the last texts that, we exchange, it was towards the end of the season. And he said to me, he says, "Hey, you know what? You're really getting a lot better at this. You're actually pretty good, but man, you're starting to look old on TV." So this was typical RJ. Always had a humorous side to it. But I would say this, I still remember, I tried to think of sometimes slow down, make sure that you speak correctly, make sure that you explain everything well. But we also all have our quirkiness, right? Like I'm sure some people told RJ, "Hey, he's up on the tone there. Don't yell. Don't overextend the syllable or whatnot." But RJ was like, "No, that's my way." And so it's maybe it's an advice I always will carry with me, but at times it's just I get too excited and it goes too fast.
I appreciate that, man. Thank you for letting us know about that.
Absolutely. I mean, just RJ is just so big for Buffalo. I mean, I don't really know how else to put it. Growing up, I mean, I've been in Buffalo my whole life and playing hockey since I was little. So, Dad and I practicing at home with our mini sticks, and obviously, he's going and calling over RJ. So in my childhood, RJ was so important to us and to my infatuation with hockey. So I'm just curious to get your take on it because I'm sure as everybody else in Buffalo shares the same sentiment. What does RJ represent for Buffalo, and what is the legacy that he is leaving?
Well, I mean, think of it this way. RJ is the one person through all the years that connected every single Sabres players. From Gilbert Perreault to Devin Levi, there's only one constant person, and that is Rick Jeanneret. So, I mean, that to me is pretty impressive, right? Even though RJ didn't call the games last year, but he came on the pregame show. He came on Sabres Live. So we talked to him all the time. So he's the one constant person. People wanted to tune on the games to hear Rick Jeanneret. I talk about those media meal. You would be so impressed with the amount of visitors media that would want to come and say hi to RJ, shake his hand, tell a story. Visitor coaches that would come in and say, "Hey, RJ, how you doing?" and want to talk to him. Because at one point in his career, RJ didn't travel anymore. So the only time you got to see him was in Buffalo. So the amount of people that wanted to come and say hi to him and shake his hand and spend a couple of minutes just talking to him was pretty impressive. And, my son dressed as Rick Jeanneret for one Halloween. He had the suspenders, the headset, he had the white wig, he had the turtleneck. He was RJ for Halloween. Who else? Who else in all sports? Not just hockey, but who else in all sports is as big as a figure that you would say kids will dress up as that person for Halloween. I mean, some of the best voices, like Jim Nantz, right? He's unreal, but nobody's going to dress like Jim Nantz for Halloween. But RJ was that for us in Buffalo. You could dress as RJ for Halloween and people would know who you were.
So KJ, you brought up the fact that, growing up, you play mini six with your dad.
Oh, yeah.
That would be.
Oh, yeah.
So growing up for me, a lot of people play sports, and I played sports, but it was always, my grandma would say, you're going to be the next Rick Jeanneret. It wasn't, you're going to be the next, what would be now Josh Allen.
Exactly.
For me, Rick Jeanneret sparked this. The only reason that I am here is Rick Jeanneret, growing up as a Sabres fan. So definitely emotional last few days, just kind of your childhood is coming to a close. But Marty, could you just help me and maybe everybody in Buffalo that's heard Rick Jeanneret for the memorable calls for over half a century. Can you help us understand the man they heard through the broadcasts and why who he was such an important part of what you saw on TV?
It's cutting up a little bit, so I didn't catch the last part. Do you want to repeat that for me quickly?
Yeah. So, everyone in Buffalo knows Rick Jeanneret for his calls, but what was it about him personally that made him, so successful and have so much emotion in those calls?
So RJ, when I get ready for a game, I put hours of preparation and I study the players and the number parts and what's going on. I remember when I was with the New York Rangers, we had two unbelievable play-by-play guy, one on TV, one on radio, Sam Rosen and Kenny Alberts. Those guys do football, they do baseball, and they have big sheets in front of them, and they have all the players and their stats and everything. RJ only had two sheets in front of him, but really one. It was the visitors team, the number, and the players. Everything else was up here. It was in his mind, in his brain. He had a real computer. He didn't need to study it for hours. He knew exactly a moment in the last game, a moment in the last year, in the last 5 years. He didn't need to write it down. That's what he was. That's why he was able to sometimes not overly focus on the stats and the players, but he was able to bring emotions to the game because he didn't have all of that in front of him to take away from the flow of the game, right? So that's the line that you have to be careful. Some people try to do without any notes, and then they can't give you any information. Some people try to do it with too many notes, and they don't give you the actual story of the game. They just give you numbers. RJ was able to walk that line, but he didn't even have anything in front of him. It was all in his brain and his computer up there, and that was very impressive.
Wow. Yeah, no, just a legend and such a, the heart of Buffalo. And as you said, all the way from Perot all the way to Levi, he's just been here for so long.
Yeah, man. And thank you so much, Marty, for having the time to speak with us.
Yes,
we
thanks,
appreciate
Marty.
you giving
Thank
us
you
all the
very much.
information and giving us all those little tidbits about RJ that people might not have known. Appreciate you for coming out. I would say.
Well, thank you.
You wouldn't do that. So why do you do this? Distracted driving kills an average of 9 people and injures over 1,000 every day in America. Put down your phone. Lives depend on it. Don't drive intoxicated. Don't drive intoxicated. A sobering message from AAA.
Everybody for sticking around.
All right, awesome. Yeah, thanks for being here. And we're going to get into more of our regular program here. We're going to start off with a little bit of a variety hour segment, some news that's been going on in Buffalo. First of all, Ilya Lyubushkin traded to the Anaheim Ducks for a 4th round 2025 pick. What do we think about that?
Well, I think it was a little surprising to see based on the core of defensemen that were available. I know many fans may have thought that the first domino to fall maybe from this current core, possibly Jacob Bryson.
Or Clog as well. I
Possibly
think
even
Clog is one that I was personally looking at a little
Cal
bit.
Clegg.
Clegg, I'm sorry.
Is it Clay or Bob?
Whoa.
But
Yeah.
I think it also boils down to what was Anaheim looking for. Just because the Sabres, maybe associates and fans, want to see one gone, it doesn't mean it's the same player that Anaheim was desiring or coveting.
Exactly.
So we'll miss Labushkin. I know the first memory, and maybe one of the only memories that comes to mind, that Tampa Bay overtime shorthanded goal.
Mhm.
But we'll see how he fares in Anaheim. And down the road a little bit, but fourth-round pick is in the bank here for Buffalo.
If you want to continue on as well, Bo Bichette playing down with the Bisons. You can say up with the Bisons, sure. Bo Bichette going down with an injury and playing with them. Kind of what was that time like in Buffalo?
Yeah, absolutely. So back actually the last day of July, he injured. The definition was a right patellar tendonitis diagnosis. In Seattle is where that happened. And so you fast forward about 2 weeks or so, he recovers. And then August 16th and August 17th, he spent time here, back where he came up from.
Mhm.
Let's not forget, in Buffalo, did Bo Bichette. And pretty successful day. I mean, an established MLB player going down, you would figure he'd be pretty successful, and that was just the case. 2 hits on the 16th, 2 hits on the 17th, and on that 17th, 3 RBIs. So really productive there from Bo Bichette. And he's now back with the Jays. He flew back to Cincinnati on that past Friday to rejoin the team. But it was really nice for fans that came out to get to see one of the Blue Jays stars and somebody that they also had seen in the past. So you don't always get the MLB big-time talent here, sometimes coming up, but this time coming down. But very special, and we'll see what he can help contribute to the Jays in this tight wild card race.
Yeah. All right, everybody wake up. We're talking about Bills now. So we're getting into the preseason game that I really don't want to talk about because it was not.
It was mayhem.
It was mayhem.
It was mayhem.
So we're going to be recapping that a little bit. They were in Pittsburgh this past Saturday. They started off with their starters, right? And everybody's like, okay, well, it's Bills Steelers. They're looking fine. And what happens? Talk to me, Colton. I mean, what happens after that?
Man, it's undisciplined play.
Yes.
Horrid O-line. It's a horrible showing from the O-line.
Yes.
Especially, we'll get into it a little bit later, but what was it, like 6 first half? I might have been.
Oh my, yeah.
It was bad. It was really bad, and it wasn't just bad in terms of. I mean, I thought Josh looked great.
Yes, agreed.
Despite,
Agreed.
and I thought the receivers did well. I thought Gabe Davis had a great game.
Mhm.
Yeah, and let's start talking about that, right? Because I think offensively, I think we won that week, or not that week, but I think. I mean, obviously, you can throw Allen in the winners column. I think he looked great. The O-line didn't really help him shine, but even Davis gives us hope once again after battling this ankle injury from last season. And how many catches did he have? How many yards? I mean, obviously, he had that really big catch that was called back because of the O-line.
I mean,
so.
he went, I think, two catches for 29 yards, but it felt like a lot more. He had that catch that was called back.
Mm-hmm.
It sounded so negative, and looking at the score, like it didn't even feel like 27-15. It felt like a blowout.
Exactly.
And
That 15
right.
only came in the fourth quarter.
Right, exactly. So
it was just nothing.
So I think, like, outside of the obvious glaring issues that have been there for the entire offseason, at the tackle position depth, or even there was, in the draft, there was conversation of drafting a tackle to take over for Spencer Brown, and the defense was that he battled a back injury. He was great.
DeJuan Jones, right?
DeJuan Jones, the name
Fell
was
down
out of Ohio State. But the right tackle position, the defense was that, it was a back injury, and that he was great his rookie year. But what we've seen in the preseason hasn't been great whatsoever. And defensively, it's the same thing. It's a middle linebacker position.
Yeah. And there's a lot of criticism kind of going the way of the front office as well, because it's like this O-line position and the linebacker position, this middle linebacker position, it doesn't feel like we really addressed a whole lot. You know what I mean? I think at least from this preseason game, it certainly didn't. And when we're talking about on the topic of tackles, like Spencer Brown, I think they've been holding out on him for the past, few seasons, kind of really waiting for him to take that step.
Mm-hmm.
but he just really hasn't shown up. And even Deion Dawkins last game was struggling a lot.
Yeah, that showed very early into the game. We saw a lot of the O-line falling apart easily when we saw Josh have that one scramble where he was running around for so long and no one knew exactly what was going to happen.
Yes.
And then we saw many instances of that going on later when they put in Matt Barkley at the same time.
Yeah, let's talk about Matt Barkley too. I mean, just
3 interceptions, forced fumble. It was
Yeah.
a tough day for the Bills O-line and the quarterback standpoint.
And
so
see, that becomes a really interesting conversation too, because last week was the opposite, the exact opposite, where it's like Kyle Allen comes in and he's not looking good, but all of a sudden Matt Barkley comes in and it's like, okay, this guy seems like he's really putting competition. And then what happened this week? Goes back down again. And then Kyle Allen comes in, seals the deal a little bit. And now I think that QB2 position, I mean, Hunter, we were talking about this pre-show, and Hunter made the really good observation that it's a best of 3, and they're going to settle it back in Chicago. So, yeah,
I got Matt Barkley
really
winning
tight
that.
right now.
I got Matt Barkley winning that best of 3.
I love Matt Barkley, and that's a tough prediction to make
Yeah,
because nobody expected him to be in this position anyway.
Right. I mean, you think of Matt Barkley. In my head, I'm thinking of Bills clinch the playoff berth against the Steelers,
Yes.
and Matt Barkley's on the sideline during a terrible towel in Pittsburgh, and he's on the sideline. Okay, he's not on the field.
Exactly.
And as a quarterback too, I mean, I like to say that if anything horrible were to happen to the franchise quarterback of Buffalo, things would look pretty negative. Yeah, knock on wood.
Lord have mercy.
Things would be all but over. But
Yes.
but you have to have someone take the reins, and Matt
Yes.
Barkley showed last game why he can't do that.
He's a Bills guy, man.
Right. He's
He's
a
a
great
spirit that you need.
right.
on
He's,
the-
a,
feel
he's
like-
a great guy. I just don't know about.
I feel like putting that last game on Matt Barkley doesn't really sit well with me because the O-line was bad. He had a tip pass for the interception. One of those I would say was probably a bad read where it was double coverage on the right sideline.
Yes.
That was probably a bad one. But other than that, I don't really think that you can – even the forced fumble, you can't really put on him because it was the O-line getting pressure.
Well, here's
Yeah,
something
so
to battle
bring it
that.
up, bring it up,
Okay,
sure.
I found a stat about this because I was curious. Was it Matt Barkley or was it the O-line? Matt Barkley has the third lowest pressure rating in the preseason. It's only like 10%.
Yeah.
It's the third lowest out of every quarterback that's played.
Yeah.
I think the only one that's below him is Desmond Ritter and someone else.
Yeah.
So it doesn't seem like it's an O-line play. I mean, they played horrible, and that is tough for me to believe that 10%.
yeah.
But more than anything, it was indiscipline.
Yeah.
Very
The
undisciplined football.
disappointing thing about, I think it was the first pick that he made was
It
was such a nice drive down the field too. And then just right there, it's like, so again, Barkley and Allen have a score to settle back in Chicago. Let's move on to the linebacker position as well, because Tyrell Dodson didn't have a great week either. They brought in AJ Klein to kind of help out. And obviously, you have Terrell Bernard that's on the bench right now with a hamstring injury, and who's Dorian Williams, who we'll get to in a second. But Dodson, they're keeping him in all the way until the 4th, and that's not a good look. That's what happened with Elam and Benford last week when they kept both of them in kind of all the way down the line because Dane Jackson kind of has that CB2 spot picked out right now. So what are we thinking about this linebacker position? Obviously, let's talk about Dorian Williams because I think we discussed it earlier. He had a pretty decent week.
I find it interesting. He's led the tackle count in the past 2 games here.
Yes.
It was 7 the last game versus the Colts and 4 this past Saturday versus the Pittsburgh Steelers. So it's very interesting to see if he can continue that, and it would bring a lot of confidence to Bills fans. I feel like I'm beating a dead horse by saying this, but the debate of, well, what's his role? What does it have to do with the departure of Edmonds? Is it to fill it right away, or is it to work at it? So
Yes.
however you view it, 2 nice performances. We'll see if it can continue in Chicago.
Well, I think to kind of piggyback off that, the argument against Dorian Williams when they came in, they said that they weren't developing. Well, they weren't going to throw him right into the fire. I don't know if that meant so much that they didn't have plans for that right now, or if it was more of a project. But right now, it seems like if you start the project now and throw him in a middle linebacker, I mean, not throw him in. I wish they would have developed him going into the preseason to play the position a little bit better because he's looked great. Okay, you look at Dodson, you're looking at, I mean, it's tough to judge Bernard because he's hurt, but you're looking at Dorian Williams, and he's a freak. He's an athlete, and he's so explosive in the middle. And that's something that Dodson doesn't bring. You know, they want to go with Dodson because he's a veteran. He's been around the team. He backed up Edmonds. I think he played or started a couple games last year and filling in for Edmonds. But the ceiling is so. Where is it? I don't think
That's a tough question. Yeah.
And you're looking at Dorian Williams, and it's like, oh, he's too small. He's this. He's that. The Bills haven't said they're not going to throw him in at a linebacker at some point. So he's not going to get any bigger. He's not going to get any taller. How much do you want to bulk him up?
Yes.
They like to have athletes at the linebacker position. Look at Matt Milano.
Exactly.
But what are you waiting for? Like, I understand.
Right.
Like, what if you were? It's
And
a
our
huge
window
gap,
is-
right? You're not.
Exactly.
It doesn't seem like they're bringing anyone in. Anthony Barr is still a free agent. And you haven't heard anything about that. If you wanted a veteran,
Right.
per se, but you're gonna hold on to Dodson, and is it actually Bernard's job to lose, and he's just injured right now? Was there a plan there that we're not seeing?
Well,
And if I may, just real quick, we can put a pin in this one. You hold it for a second. We have a question from one of our audience members, and we'll take a look at that. From JJ Mercaldo, how do we like the Bills to make it all the way to the championship? And if so, against who? Okay, so I think, again, I just mentioned, I think our window is closing. Josh Allen's a freak of nature, and we are kind of like getting, I see the eyebrow raise. You disagree?
No, I disagree with that. I
Okay,
disagree with
talk
that
about it. Let's talk
because you're looking at how porous the team played against the Steelers. Okay.
I'm not basing it on
No. I understand. It's a preseason game.
Well,
Okay. Nobody. The Ravens have won. What was it before they lost?
24,
against
and then the
Washington.
Commanders beat them last
Doesn't
night.
mean anything. It's a preseason game, and the goal of it is to figure out what you have at depth and who's where in position battles. But I don't want to say that window is closing because Josh Allen is still a Buffalo Bill, and as silly as it sounds, he just seems like you have wide receivers that are
Right.
He doesn't. What's the term? Oh man, he's quarterback proof. Like, he seems to be everything proof to get them to the next level.
Right.
And the next level is the playoffs, but he hasn't gotten into the Super Bowl.
So I see what you're as long as we have Josh and we can build around him. for
I don't
these next-
think that window ever closes. I think it
Okay.
may narrow. Stephon Diggs is going into age 30 season, but what would make it close other than Josh Allen not being a Buffalo Bill? Because he's gotten them to he has single-handedly gotten to the playoffs for 3 straight years.
That's a fair point.
3 or 4.
It would be 4.
It would be 4.
Yeah.
So
Oh, that's
that's
so
crazy
to think about. Yeah.
oh my god! But anyways,
Mhm.
you're looking at it, and it's Josh Allen, and you're looking at the Bengals game. The whole team played horrible. Josh didn't play great, but it wasn't just on him. You're looking at the Chiefs game. He played great. Okay, Josh Allen played great football. Look what had the 13 seconds.
Best game I've
throw up.
seen.
But defensively, there was questions about coaching. There was no questions about Josh Allen. There were 0 questions about Josh Allen.
Yes.
So once he got past those rookie pains and the mistakes and this and that, he's a top 3 or 4 quarterback in the league, and I don't see that changing anytime soon.
All right.
And
You won me over.
and-
You won
and
me over.
because of that, the window can't close.
Yeah.
I think players come in and out, but as long as your franchise quarterback is there.
Let's address the second part of the question. Who are they meeting in the Super Bowl?
I think based on the way
If and when we do make it.
based on the way the conferences are split up, I think there's, in my opinion, one clear answer, and it's a team that the Bills will be playing in late November. In fact, the Sunday after Thanksgiving, and that's the Philadelphia Eagles. I just don't see it any other way. However, if the Chiefs or the Bengals were in the NFC, that's another conversation. But the fact of the matter is they're not. And so if you're going to have a Bills Super Bowl, I believe the matchup would be Philadelphia Eagles. And in my opinion, you could call that the greatest tailgate party in America.
I would combat that,
Good
and I
point,
would
good
have to
point.
go with the 49ers
Yeah.
because I love that
Really?
49ers
Yeah.
defense. I love CMC, everything about that 49ers team, and I'm a Rams fan. So the fact that I'm picking a team from my own division, I can't even pick the Rams because I know we won't even win our division.
Fair.
That's how I know that I would want to see the 49ers going up against the Bills.
All right, so we have the
Yeah,
49ers side of the ball, and the Eagles side of the
all right.
table.
Here's my spin on it. I'm
Okay.
going to be objective.
Right.
It doesn't come down to who I love or what my opinion. It comes down to the fact that the 49ers made it to the conference championship, and
That's true.
they got blown out because their starting quarterback, Brock Purdy,
Yes.
who was the 3rd string quarterback to start the year,
Mm-hmm.
couldn't throw a football. He looked at, it's mic'd up. He's looking at his LB. I can't throw it. And then the journeyman, what's his name? Josh Josh Johnson, yeah.
Yes.
He comes in and he gets a concussion. And they have nobody to put. Brock Purdy goes back in, and you're not going to take a forfeit in the NFC Championship, but it was basically a forfeit.
Yeah.
You're doing jet sweeps. He can't throw the football.
Yeah. Is Brock Purdy their guy?
That is what they have said.
Because that's the only difference between the Eagles and the and the
I actually think
Jalen Hurts is
Established.
established. They have a great offense.
Shanahan went on and said that he's the guy. I don't know what the exact wordage was, but he's their starter until nothing. He's the starter. Yeah. So I just think that their ceiling is so high. They're not an aging team that's like, oh man, like their window's closing, like people are saying about the Bills. I just think that there's so much there. I think they have one of the best head coaches in the NFL.
Yeah.
I mean, top 3 or 4. I think Sirianni's a good head coach. I think this roster is just so good. That's why they got there. Yes. And then obviously Brock Purdy goes down and you get handed the NFC Championship. Maybe they would have won it regardless. That's right. But to say that there's nobody even touchable to them to get there, I disagree with.
Yeah. No, okay. I mean, let's get back on the topic of the Bills. Thank you for the question, JJ. We do appreciate that. And so now to kind of wrap this up, moving past our all of our preseason stuff. Well, not quite yet, I guess. This last week of preseason, besides Allen, Barkley, and all that discussion, who needs to step up in order to make the roster? I know we kind of had our discussion last week about this, but again, this is the last week of preseason, and we got to leave it on the line here.
I think I got a great answer, and that's going to be Deshawn White, who just got picked up from the USFL. Yes. So with the Michigan Panthers picking up this new guy, he's a linebacker, and that's going to fill the void. So I hope they give him an opportunity next week or early and before their first game, I would say, like practices, they give him an opportunity, because I feel like with the tackles that he made in Oklahoma, that's where he played. He was very prominent there. I think he was top 10 out of Texas when he was in high school. So he's definitely a prominent guy. That Deshaun White kid is something I would definitely look out for. That's who I'm hoping that they move on to.
Yeah. Hunter, give us one last player, and then let's get out of here, yeah?
Sure. And for me, it's the running back room. You just acquired Ty Johnson from free agency. You have a bunch of other running backs. In fact, Denzel Mims was the one to score. Darren Evans, and, of course, Cook, Harris, as well as Latavius Murray. So you figure there's probably about 3 spots for the 53-man roster. Who's going to be? I think right now you have Cook and Harris slotted in. So the battle could be for 3, and I feel like the featured matchup is Ty Johnson versus Latavius Murray, based on past evidence on what we know from each of those players. However, we'll see if Evans or Mims could make a case for themselves. But if I were to predict, I think that's a really toss-up between Murray and Johnson personally.
Do you think that Murray has the edge? I mean, obviously Ty Johnson was just brought to Buffalo yesterday, but like, do you think that his style of game suits him better to make it? For me, it's like, I think James Cook can be that same back, and if you want to give some of the the early down snaps to Damian Harris and Latavius Murray, you could do that. Exactly. And then that's where James Cook, I think, plays some of his best football is third down and when he's out wide. Like, I think he's very underrated in that aspect. So for me, it's just like they bring in a player similar to Hines, and it's that conversation about he's coming in, he's going to be the third down back.
Right.
But how can you utilize your offense with the personnel currently to get there?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question to go over. And again, all those questions hopefully will be answered this upcoming Saturday against the Bears in Chicago. But for right now, that is all the time we have for you. Thank you for joining us, and a special thank you to Marty Biron for joining us on the show earlier. Great insight. And again, if you'd like to see more content from us, check out our website at buffalosportsinsider.com. We're posting videos as soon as we can. But we're going to let RJ close this one out today. Thanks for joining us. Have a great rest of your week, guys. Take care.
My career, it's not over, not quite yet. I look forward to the games and memories to come, always keeping in mind, there are thousands of Sabre fans watching and listening alongside me. And there's one moment I look forward to it most, and I hope it's not far off, and that is when this city finally hoists the Stanley Cup. Thank you for this wonderful honor.